Kip, what's up, brother? Great to be back with you for our Ask Me Anything today.
Yeah, it's good to be here, man.
What's
How was your
what's
weekend?
this on your eye here? Is that a shiner? A little bit of a
That's
shiner?
yeah, it's birthday rolls.
Birthday roll.
You know
Oh,
how
when was your
those go.
birthday?
Yesterday.
Oh, bro, I'm
Yesterday.
horrible. I'm a horrible human
I
being.
know. I
Happy
stayed up all
birthday.
night waiting for a message, a private message from Mickler to tell me.
You know, and the
I'm just
crazy
joking.
thing is remembering birthdays and these sorts of things is like what I'm really, really good at. So how could I
Yeah,
forget? Man, I'm
it's
sorry.
it's fine.
So how
No,
old are
it
you
was
now?
44.
The big
44
four
years old.
four. Nice.
Yeah. And it's funny because I joked around with my wife, like, hey, on my birthday, I don't just leave me alone. And it's the anniversary of my dad's death, right? And so I felt like I might wake up and just drive down to Sevier County and you know what I mean, just remove myself kind of for the day. Ironically enough, I didn't, to be honest with you, for my family, because they want to celebrate my day. You know, so there's that
Yeah,
dichotomy of like,
good.
it's what I want to do versus what's best for my family, and what was best is probably for me not to fully check out. But it was funny because she knows a good day for me is a good day is going to the gym, you know, and
Yeah.
getting some jujitsu in. What she doesn't know is going to jujitsu on your birthday is just asking for a beating, right? Because
For
I
sure.
don't know about you, but like whenever it's someone's birthday, everyone goes, "Oh, we get to beat you up. Like we're gonna all roll extra hard, right? Because it's your birthday, right? And it's
Right.
like
Makes sense
it's
to
the one
me.
day you kind of don't want to go to the gym is on your
It's the
birthday."
culture of men. A lot of people won't ever understand that, but it's the culture of
Yeah,
men. Yeah, that's cool. No,
that's
that's good
funny.
that you got at least some training. And it's always interesting when people ask about holidays, especially fake holidays like Valentine's, which is coming up, and President's Day, and like these fake holidays. I even say like Veterans Day, Memorial Day. I know I'm going to get reamed for that. I'm a veteran, and it's like it's good to honor our veterans. It's good to honor our fallen. I'm not dismissing or mocking that side of things. It's like, but do we need a day dedicated to that where it's just about the biggest sale your favorite company has? Like
Yeah,
it's
it's lost
crazy.
its like if you were going to really celebrate those days, it would be a day of reflection and focus on whatever that holiday was for. But no one does that.
That's right.
So it's
That's right.
just yeah, a day to go shopping.
But I always get a kick out of it. Labor Day is another one. What are you gonna do today? I'm gonna do the same thing I did yesterday. It's what are you gonna do for your birthday? The same thing I did every day
Yeah.
for the last
Hit the
2 years
gym, get
before.
some
Yeah,
training
exactly.
done. Yeah.
Which is exactly how it
Exactly.
should be. So, well, good. Well, happy belated birthday. Proud to know
Thank you.
you. Honored to call you a friend. And of course, I remember having a conversation with you when your father passed away, and my condolences on that. I too know what that's like, and that's a hard thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. But so was life, right? And ironically enough, even on the mats, before we even started training yesterday, we ended up talking for probably about 30 minutes just about death. You know, one of the guys that was training with, he lost his daughter when she was 13, and we're just
Mm.
talking through the grieving process and how unfortunate that we've removed ourselves so much from the uncomfortable aspects of death that that we've lost its importance of it being on our minds, right? It's the one thing that we all share in common, but yet it's the very thing that we all avoid talking about
Right.
and preparing for. And to be frank, we should be preparing for it. So it
Well,
was
at
a good
least
day. It's a
at
good day
least
of
having
reflection
it,
for me.
yeah, at least having it on our minds so that we know what we do right now matters. Is this conversation
Yeah.
the one I want to be having if I know that I'm going to die in 5 minutes? Might
Yeah,
be might be worth evaluating. And it is, because I think the work we're
totally.
doing here is crucial and it's valuable. It's important. Not only death, but also suffering. A friend of mine who asked me the other day. He says, "What's brought you joy in your life lately?" And I posted this on Instagram. Sometimes it's weird to post these things on Instagram because it feels like I'm trying to get I don't know,
You
empathy
don't
or
want people
pity
thinking that
or
you're looking for pity. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and it's not that. Well, actually, my Facebook and Instagram and Twitter accounts, they're more of a more of like a journal for me. It helps me work through concepts and ideas. So that's part of it. I can go through and I can
Yeah.
flesh out ideas, or if I'm feeling a particular way, I can share something about it. And that's actually therapeutic for me. But also I feel like as men, it's our job to serve, right? We're supposed to, as men, to be serving other people. And it really doesn't do me any good or other men any good to be feeling a certain way, or have access to information, or have a tool or a resource, or maybe just a snippet of advice or input, to have something and then to hoard it and keep it to ourselves. If you have
Yeah.
access to something that could serve somebody else, then I feel like we have a moral responsibility to share that in a way that will impact other people. And that's why I do share on social media. So when I'm on Instagram posting about this particular question my friend asked me, it's again for me to work through it and get it out of my head, but also to serve others. But he asked me, what brings joy to your life lately? And I really thought about lying, coming up with all the
Yeah.
textbook answers about, my family and my health and our wealth and, my relationship with God, and like the textbook answers. And they're not necessarily wrong. My family, of course, brings me joy, that my relationship with God is one of joy. So it's not wrong, but it's not the entirety of the truth. The truth is that the last several months have not been what I would call joyous. It would be the opposite of that. And I
Yeah.
got thinking a lot about suffering, how it is just part of life. And in modern times, we spend an inordinate amount of time and attention and energy and resources into tools and technology and mind numbing substances and activities to detach us from the suffering that we will inevitably experience. And what a shame, because we don't ever really address the root of the issue, which is that there might be some areas of our life where we're weak or we're deficient, and we need to work on and we need to improve. And the suffering that we experience, although very painful and has some real world consequences, is crucial to our own development. And so I wrote down here a couple of things that, and I just wanted to share this before we get into too many questions, because again, I think it'll help people. And I don't want to just cover these and not really get into like the meat of it, but here's what I said. Number one, I've talked honestly with my male friends about my struggles. That is so crucial, and that is lacking from men today. They just don't have male friends. Number two is I work out 6 days per week, and I've locked in my nutrition. Number three, I journal every day about what I'm feeling and experiencing right now in the moment. Number four, I've gone back to church and I'm working to build my relationship with God. Number five, I have focused on serving the people I love most in meaningful and caring ways. So I know those sound like the textbook answers for fixing yourself and overcoming suffering, but there's a reason everybody shares those things, is because they work. So as we
Yeah.
were talking about death and suffering, if you guys are feeling that, if you're going through that yourself, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual suffering, struggle, work on building your male friendships, train your body, get familiar with your stories by journaling, develop a relationship with God, and work to serve others. I'm telling you, I'm not sure where I would be over the past 5 or 6 months if I didn't have these tools and these frameworks in place that fortunately we've developed over 8 years. I think life would look drastically different and significantly worse. So if you're struggling, I feel you. I think those things will help you. Work on those 5 things every day.
Cool. Yeah. And
Well,
if you're doing that, I was
go ahead.
just going to say maybe another call to action is like, make sure that you're staying connected to your group of guys as well. That first one's a tough one. It's probably one of the things that most of us don't do. And us reaching out, and checking in on people is exactly what's needed, and they might just need someone to reach out to them, to get the conversation going. And
Yeah.
so, if you guys know guys, or you get that prompting or that gut feeling like, hey, you know what? I should probably give Clint a call, act on it, right? Don't avoid that prompting, to reach out to someone. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, there was one other question that came in, and I got this as an email, so I thought I'd read it. I'm just going to say his first name because I'm not sure he was submitting it for an Ask Me Anything as much as for me personally, so I don't want to blast that out there without his permission.
Disclosure.
Yeah, but this, in fact, I'll change his name just for the sake of it. Is we'll just go by Jim. He says, like you, I refuse to identify as an alcoholic forever. When I tried AA once, I felt pressured, thinking I needed to openly identify as that if I wanted to go. How do you handle this? For example, when you introduce yourself or when talking with others in AA about this topic, not knowing how to resolve this issue has kept me from not going back. Well, I think that's a problem. You're not going back because there's an expectation, or at least a perceived expectation, about the way that you should show up and behave. And you know what? Get over it. You're a man. You don't owe anybody anything. And so if you want to go to AA and not introduce yourself in the standard, I am so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic, then you should not do that. Period. End of story. That's it. You don't need to explain it to anybody. You don't need to feel bad for not saying that. You don't need to
pressured,
acquiesce and do that. Just when I go, I don't say that because I'm not gonna wrap up my identity around being susceptible to alcohol. So if somebody else has an issue with it, so what? That's their own personal journey. My own personal journey is something different. And maybe I've developed that over years and years of doing this podcast and sharing my opinion and getting all sorts of positive and negative feedback where I just don't care what you say anymore. I really don't.
Yeah.
I'll take what you say, positive and negative, into consideration, but it's not going to impact me in any meaningful and significant way because I know who I am. I know what I believe, and I don't make any apologies about it. That's where we need to get to. We need to get to that point. But I think what a lot of men are missing, this goes well beyond the alcohol conversation. What a lot of men are missing is, who are you truly? How much time have you spent in thinking about these issues? So, for example, if Jim is saying, I don't identify as that. I don't feel like I am an alcoholic. I don't want to use that verbiage. Then you should really explore why that's the case. And once you really figure out why you feel that way, it becomes a whole lot easier.
Get behind it.
Exactly. You have conviction, but we're conditioned to do things, to behave a certain way, to say certain things, to not say other things. And we've never really spent any time thinking about why we should or should not do or say the things that society at large tells us to do and say. I'll tell you, a convicted man is a man who knows who he is. He knows what he believes. He's poured over, he's examined it, and he's put it to the test through action and realized that the way he sees that world, or the way he performs in this particular way, is good for him. The fruit is good. So he knows that the thought is good behind it. That's a man who's powerful. That's a man who has confidence. That's a man who has conviction. I can't tell you how often I hear from guys who are like, hey, Ryan, man, I really appreciate your message. What you put out there, what you share has helped strengthen me. Good. That's what we're trying to do. I want you to have a backbone. I don't want you to be a flaccid little jellyfish floating in the ocean based on what the currents of and the tides are doing in the water. I want you to have a spine. I want you to have a backbone. I want you to be able to navigate difficult conditions. I want you to go out and be a predator and chase what you're after. Like, I want that for you, but that requires thought, and it requires putting those thoughts to the test to really figure out, is this what I truly believe? And is this the kind of man I'm going to be? So that's it. If you want to go to AA, and don't introduce yourself like that. And that's okay. And if somebody asks you about it, first, you don't owe them an explanation. So if you're not interested in giving them an explanation, say, this works better for me on my journey. But if you are interested in sharing, then share exactly that. Hey, I don't share that because I don't feel like I'm going to wrap up my identity in that. I consider myself susceptible to alcohol abuse, and that's what works for me. No apologies.
I like it. All right, so we're going to field questions from our Iron Council from the Foundry. To learn more about the Iron Council, go to orderofman.com/Iron Council. Before we get into that, and before we hit record, I asked Ryan if we could cover a question that we actually covered last week with Sean from Matt Jenkins around maintaining a masculine frame. I'll be fully authentic here. I didn't felt like I gave this answer justice for Matt. And I thought it was such an important conversation. And Ryan, I think you actually did a Friday Field Notes on this roughly about a year ago around maintaining masculine frame. And so if you guys want kind of more detail, probably above and beyond what we're talking about here, I can look up that episode, Ryan, if you want, as you answer this question, but use that as a resource as well. But Matt's specific question was how to maintain frame with a masculine frame with our spouse, but at the same time being humble, patient, and kind. And so how do we, and I read a lot into this from like kind of a no more Mr. Nice Guy mentality, that struggle of being nice, but it going against our masculine ways, right? And how do we maintain that frame in a way that we're not undermining ourselves, perhaps?
Well, let's take the terms you used: humility, patience, and kindness. I don't really think those are at odds with maintaining your frame. I think those are probably something that will help you maintain your frame. Let's talk about humility. Humility is realizing that you're not as good as you think you are. You don't have everything figured out, that there's other people around you who might have information or ideas that can serve you or help others, that people have something to contribute above and beyond what you are contributing, and that you're weak and flawed in some ways. That actually is required for maintaining frame. So for the reason I did that podcast, whenever I did it, a while back, was because of the concept of maintaining your frame in jiu-jitsu. You don't, there's space in jiu-jitsu. It's a game of space, right? You can probably speak more to this on it than I can, but it's a game of space. It's managing distance and managing the gaps in that distance. So for example, if I want to get you off of me, you're mounted on top of me, and I want to get you off of me, a hip bump, thrusting your hips up in the air might be enough to get you to move up, but that's not where the space is created. The space is created when you go back down. And in that split second of you going up and me going down, there's a little bit of space. And what do we do with that space? We have to fill it. And what do we fill it with? Well, we fill it with an elbow, or you fill it with if you can slide your knee out or your foot, something. You're trying to block that space so you can maintain frame and keep that guy from advancing his position. And it's the same thing in life. You want to maintain that frame. You don't want anything to come in and derail you from your goals and your objectives. But in order to maintain frame, you need to realize where the threat is. And one of the threats might be that you are deficient in a particular thing. Maybe you're impatient. Matt used patience. Maybe you're impatient. So humility is realizing that you're an impatient person. And now you start to uncover where that impatience is coming from. For me, I can tell you exactly what it is: mismanagement of my time and schedule. That's when I get impatient. And I'm impatient. But I've noticed that when I schedule my time and my day appropriately, patience isn't an issue. Because even as things come up, it's like, yeah, well, I figured that would come up, and I created a little bit of gap here in my schedule, so I have time to deal with that and address that. It's when I'm stacked up to my eyeballs in tasks and projects and everything's coming at me a million miles an hour, and I didn't plan out my day effectively. And the first thing I did is I hit snooze on my alarm instead of getting up and going to the gym. And now I'm 30 minutes late from the gym because I got out of bed 30 minutes late. You see how this happens. It's a mismanagement of time. So humility in maintaining a frame now is, okay, I realize that if I don't get out of bed, I lose a half an hour a day, and that translates to everything else. And then guess who I take it out on? My wife and my kids. That's what every man does. So instead, I'm going to be humble enough to realize that I need to actually get out of bed on time and stick to my schedule and stick to my commitments so that I can serve people without being impatient. It might also mean that you need to say no to some things. Or when you have a deadline and somebody calls you, here's a simple one. Let's say you have an appointment at noon and you're about to get on this call and somebody calls you on the phone and you're like, oh, I'll just take this really quick. You know better. You know better. You know that conversation is going to take 15 minutes or longer. So what's that going to do to your other appointment? It's going to jack up your schedule. And it's not fair to that person who actually set the schedule with you. So what you do is you hit decline. That's it. If you want to send a custom message that says, hey, I got to I got a call at noon. I'll call you back at 1 o'clock. Fine, whatever. But don't take the call. Set those boundaries. That's maintaining your frame. Set those boundaries up. Now, people will say, oh man, I just feel bad about doing that. Right. Because you're being weak. This goes back to what we were saying before. You haven't thought about what you value, which to me is being a man who's respectable, who honors his commitments. And if I'm late, and it happens, I was late to this call, Kip. If I'm late, it does happen, but you don't make it a regular thing. It should be an anomaly. So I don't really think that being humble and patient and kind. Well, here's an interesting thing on kindness. So let's take that scenario. Well, I'll feel bad if I don't take this call. I've got this other call and I'll feel bad about this. So I'm not being very kind. Well, no, by taking it, you're actually not being kind to the person who was intelligent enough to schedule a meeting with you 3-4 days earlier. What about that person?
Totally.
You're disrespecting that person. So why does the guy who needs you right now take precedent over the guy who said, hey, let's set something up? At least he respected you enough to set something up.
Yeah.
So there's trade-offs here. And when you're saying, well, we talk about this in the Iron Council, is it kind to see one of our brothers struggling and then, rub his balls and make him feel better about his deficiencies? Like, is that kind? No, it's the antithesis of that. You know what's kind? Getting in his face, depending on the situation, saying, you can do better. And I know you can because I've seen you do better. How can I support you? People say, oh, that's harsh. That's mean. I can't believe. Oh, it's contentious. Yeah, well, maybe that's exactly what that person needs. Maybe that guy needs some accountability. Maybe no one's ever gotten his face. When I started talking, to go back to alcoholism, when I started talking about this with some friends, you know what? I had a couple of friends who were like, oh yeah, I knew. What? And you didn't say anything? Well, I didn't know how to bring it up and I didn't want to encroach. You know what all of that is? And, bless my friends. I don't want to throw them under the bus too much, but you know what that is? That's selfishness. That's what that is.
They're avoiding the conflict with the uncomfortableness of having the conversation is what they're avoiding.
It has nothing to do with me. If you cared more about me than you cared about you in that situation, you would have said what needed to be said. Now, I'm not blaming them for my choices, so let's not misconstrue that. My choices are my choices, but those friends have their choices too. And if you care about somebody, you better do what needs to be done. So at least at a minimum, you can look yourself in the eye and you can say, hey, you know what? He didn't take my advice, but I gave it to him because he needed it. But it's selfish to look at another man struggling and say, I don't want to bring it up. It's awkward. It's what if this, what if that? What if you don't say anything? And the next time that guy goes and gets drunk, he decides to drive down the road and he kills himself or somebody else. What then? Yeah. And are you culpable in that? I mean, it's not your fault, but I would say that would be something that would tear me up if I was in that situation.
Yeah. And would you say at the root of taking action in that example is being clear on what you stand for?
That and love. Like, you're talking about somebody talking to another friend?
Yeah. Overcoming that natural tendency.
That and love.
Being clear on what's valuable to you and really loving someone.
Yeah, because if you don't know what you stand for, then any behavior is acceptable.
Yeah.
Right. So, Kip, and I'm not saying this is you by any means, but if I know that you're having some fidelity issues in your marriage, I don't stand for that. That's not okay with me. And I know it's not okay with you either. Okay. So that has been maintained. Now, I love you. I care about you. I want you to win. So it's my responsibility to bring it up. Now, if you blow up and you explode, look, your reaction's your reaction. It doesn't matter.
That's on me.
That's on you. Right. And if, you know what, if I lose my friendship with you because I bring that up to you, that to me is worth the trade-off. Yeah. It really is. Yeah. Your friendship is, I'll say it this way, my care for you is more important than our so-called friendship.
Yeah, it's deeper than that. Yeah, yes. I like this, Ryan. One thing that in some leadership training I do for our employees is around accountability conversations. And one thing that I've stole from that training that I think is profound is we often don't have the uncomfortable conversations because we've jumped to the conclusion of what will probably happen versus pausing and saying, should something be said? Yes or no?
Period.
And if the answer is yes, then tactically determine, all right, I know I have to say something, period. End of sentence. Now, how do I do it in a manner that's effective? But we don't do that. We immediately go, well, I don't want to say something to Ryan. Why? Because he'll blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, stop. Should you say something, yes or no?
Yep.
And if the answer is yes, then your job is to figure it out.
Right. Right.
And how do you do it effectively?
I actually had this exact scenario happen when I wanted to tell guys in the Iron Council about me overcoming this alcohol issue. And I thought long and hard about it. If I tell these guys, I'm going to have a mass exodus, I'm going to lose trust, just like you're saying. But I came to the conclusion that in order for me to get back in integrity with myself and other people, that it had to be said. And the result didn't actually matter. It matters. I'm not saying, but it's not a factor as to whether or not I should have said it, which is why I made the decision to say it.
Yeah, I like it. What are your thoughts around that people will fight against this, right? Like when I think about the typical conversation around maintaining like your frame, like you're going to get pushback even from your spouse and your kids and friends around standing behind the things that you know are important and that you value. Any thoughts around that? Like how do we navigate those waters, or any strategies there?
Yeah, you just prepare people for it. So let's go back to our jujitsu analogy. So I'm trying to maintain frame, establish a frame, keep you away from getting a better position on me. If I do that with you, Kip, it's because there's an understanding of this is how the game is played. I'm going to try to advance. Ryan's going to try to keep me from advancing. He's going to try to advance. I'm going to try to keep him from advancing. The rules are well established.
Yeah.
But if a new guy comes into the gym and he's never trained before, and I throw him around like a rag doll because I'm trying to maintain frame and win and submit, I'm strangling him and choking him and doing all these things, but he doesn't know the rules, that's not fair. That's not right. And so how does that translate over into a relationship, for example? Well, if you've established rules, but you haven't communicated the rules to your wife, and then you just start abiding by them and hoping that she will abide by them, that's not fair to her. That's not proper. That's not what a good husband would do. Same thing with your children. If, on the other hand, you have some things that you want in place, like here's how I expect to be treated, here's how we will communicate, here's how we will talk to each other, here are the consequences if we don't do that, and you articulate the rules, now the decision is theirs. If you want to engage with me, you have to abide by these rules. If you do not abide by these rules, you do not engage with me. It's very simple. I'm no longer making the choice. The other party is deciding, but you actually have to stick with it too. And that's the most challenging thing, is that once the people know the expectation, they've agreed to it, then once they break or even get up to that line, fire a warning shot if you need to. But if they cross that line, you have to abide by that rule and that consequence of that rule.
Yeah.
So be careful of consequences you're making too. If you say, for example, yeah, Ryan, I'm going to set up boundaries. My wife has really been talking to me poorly and I won't have it anymore. If she does, then I'm going to get a divorce. It's like, whoa. Like if you say that, the odds of her mistreating you are pretty high, because that's what we do to each other in marriages at times. So the first time she calls you a name or says something or does something you don't like towards you, you're going to get a divorce. Like, so what does that do? Number one, that's a bad rule. It's not appropriate. And number two, it sets you up for failure, because now you have to retreat on your boundary. And then she knows it's not a boundary.
Totally. Well, and I was reading a book around parenting and how critical it is that trustworthiness is super critical, right? For kids, so literally from a stability and safety perspective, that you're consistent as parents. And it's ironic is because I've always felt it like, oh, we need to be consistent with like good things. No, we need to be consistent, even with the negative consequences.
Yes.
Right. To maintain your integrity, you have to keep those boundaries and you have to see them through, even if they're negative. Because what are you then establishing? The really quick story. You remember Hunter Locke? Old school IC guy, Captain Locke. I remember we had a hard rule on Echo. You're on every call Tuesday. And when I took over, it's like everyone committed. You will be on these calls every Tuesday. And the commitment was yes, right? And we had some conversations for guys that struggle with that commitment. I remember I get a text on Tuesday earlier in the day from Hunter saying, hey, can't get on, Kip. Me and the wife have been fighting. We're resolving it. We're going to go on date night tonight. And I replied back to him. I said, hey, you made your commitment that you'd be on the call at 7. I hope you'll honor your commitments. And just left it as that. He was on the call. And if you asked him why he was on the call, he was like, this is part of the problem.
Yeah.
This is part of the problem with his wife, is that he's not honoring his commitments. And what is he teaching his wife when he goes, you know what, let me undermine this commitment for you right now. Let me not be a man of integrity. Which was the very thing that they're arguing over.
Yeah. I can already hear people, oh, well, he's trying to date us. We should let him go on a date. Like, I can already hear people making excuses. And this is why we're so pathetic and weak, especially among men. Like, that doesn't happen. And in what area of society does a man say that? Like, hey, you made a commitment to 7. I'll help you be there. It just doesn't happen, man. And that's why we're so pathetic. You know, the one thing I like that story, another story that I'm guilty of is we'll be driving on a vacation, for example. You know, we're heading down to Costa Rica like we did a couple months ago or a month ago. And you know, the kids will get out of line and be like, hey, if you don't shape up, we're not even going on vacation. Come on now.
Yeah. That's one of those bad rules, because those little kids will call you out on that shit.
Yeah,
they know
for
damn
sure.
well that you're not going to cancel.
So mind your tongue, I would say.
Yeah.
Be very aware of what you're saying. Even if it's a threat like that, let's find out. Let's find out if that's real. And then they're going to test it. Yeah. And of course, it's not real. And they're going to call your bluff. And then you just undermined yourself.
Yep. Yeah,
all right.
Totally.
Let's drive on
that one. All right. Murray Dixon. I've been working in the same field of bicycle mechanic and retail for almost 10 years, with my family growing, 2 kids and a third due soon. Congratulations, Murray. I need to earn more while I still find joy in work. I like how he said that. I've looked to entrepreneurship in this area to move forward in my career, but the opportunities have not been too great. My next option is to make a pivot and change career. I'm meeting with a company this weekend to potentially start an apprenticeship in farm equipment and diesel mechanics, which, one qualified, would open up opportunities, but means me moving to a rural town. Do you have advice on starting over and being the best employee I can be in a completely different field, and on moving a young family to a rural spot where you have only a few contacts? My family and I have been taking great confidence from yours and others' example about moving to rural areas and taking the let's find out mentality over the what if. I'm sick of saying what if.
Yeah. So, I mean, hey, first, take some balls to start considering that option. And I don't want to congratulate you right now because you haven't done anything, but you're moving the needle towards doing some things. And that's pretty cool. And I'm excited to see how that turns out, because most people are like, I can't do that. And then they just barely scrape by with their finances, living where they're living because things are comfortable and easy, at least somewhat. So I commend you on at least moving the needle in that direction. As far as the work and starting over, yeah, I think what we've said before is be humble. Be receptive, be curious. That's a concept I love. Just a level of curiosity about the business and what's going on. I would also say pursue excellence. This is something I've been thinking a lot about as well. You know, when you're at the gym in the morning, do you hurry and do your deadlifts, or you do them with excellence? And we all know what that means. You wear the proper attire. You've got your hydration or your pre-workout, like whatever your routine is. You're in there, you've stretched, you're ready to go. You step up to the bar, you look for all of your cues on the proper lift, you do it correctly. If your form breaks down, you'd maybe take a little bit of weight off. I know that's hard to do, but you do that because you're pursuing excellence. And I think if you're pursuing excellence in your job or in your marriage or in your fitness or in your spiritual journey, it's going to be hard for you to not succeed. I mean, it truly is.
Totally.
So look for excellence. I think about that when I get into people's cars sometimes, they're thrashed and they got garbage and trash everywhere. And it's just chaotic. And I can't help but wonder, is this person reaching their full potential in other avenues of their life? I don't know, we should do a scientific experiment, but I could probably tell you by spending 30 seconds in your car about how you're performing in the rest of your life. If your car is kind of dirty, but not a whole lot, just kind of dirty, but you can tell you kind of maybe take care of it, do maintenance on it, but it's probably 30 or 60 days after, your life's probably mediocre. If your car is impeccable, so and it's vacuumed and it's clean and the tank is full and you open the glove box and it's got, it's all ordered and there's no trash in the center console, it's either new or the rest of your life is excellent.
Yeah.
If you got Burger King, Big Mac, Whopper trash laying all over everything and, gum on the carpet and skunk and stuff like soda sprayed up and on the ceiling. And I mean, I'm pretty certain that's translating to other avenues of your life. So I'd be really curious on that. But I think if we pursue excellence, you can't help but win. I'm looking at it right now. Like, see this light right here? This light?
Yeah.
It doesn't usually look like that because it's dangling down. That's not excellent. I need to fix that, because if we're talking about pursuing excellence, then that's what that means. Excellent. And the more you can do that, the better off you are. Now, as far as the second part of the question, which was advice for moving into a new town. Yeah, support system is going to be huge. I mean, immerse yourself into the culture. That means finding a church. That means going to the gym or maybe training jujitsu. Maybe there's a woman's group, and that usually can be found through church, through exercise. That's the easiest way. That's how we
meet your neighbors.
Yeah. That's a good one. Like, go out and actually, how you hope people would welcome you to the neighborhood. Go do that. Like, maybe bake a plate of cookies and say, hey, like I just moved in. I'm your next door neighbor. Thought we'd bring this over. And then invite, if they're a family, invite husband, wife, and kids over to the house. Like, take the initiative to immerse yourself, to assimilate, as they would call it, into the environment, and not expect and hope that people would do that. I mean, you can, but why have that faulty expectation? You go out and take the initiative to immerse yourself and create the network, create the community that will really help.
Greg Cleaver. As a man, I'm a firm believer in being vulnerable and completely transparent with myself for the purpose of self-discovery and growth. When it comes to what I choose to share with my girlfriend, I'm finding it doesn't always seem to be beneficial to share my deepest fears, insecurities, and struggles. I find when I do this, it often results in a lack of confidence on the part of my partner in my masculinity and strength. Are there things you would advocate not sharing with your intimate partner?
Not what I would share, but how I would share it. Timing is important. The way that you communicate it is important, but I do think it is important that you open up to your spouse. And I used to believe that, you should burden her with your feelings and what you're struggling with. And I don't think that's true. That's something that's changed for me. I don't think it's a burden for you to explain how you feel about things. I think she probably wants to hear about that. I think she wants to be connected that way, but she also doesn't want a bumbling buffoon as a husband who can't get over himself and work towards solving his problems. So I think sharing is a crucial part of any relationship, but I would ask myself a couple of questions. Number one, why am I sharing this? If it's so that she'll, make you feel better about yourself, that's probably not a great motive for being quote unquote vulnerable with your spouse, because it's really not her job to make you feel good about yourself. And what you are doing when you do that is you're putting a lot of responsibility, or the burden, like you said, on her
On
to do
them.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a good reason would be so that she understands why you might be off the last several weeks. Because if you don't share these things with her, she's going to see
She's
that you're
making
off.
assumptions. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's like, does he love me? Is he cheating on me? Like, what's the problem? And she's going to start filling in those blanks with things that are probably not accurate. So I think a healthy exercise would be to, hey, hon, I know I've been off the last couple months or last couple weeks, and I want to share with you why that's the case and what I'm experiencing, so that you know where I'm coming from. Um, so that's the why. There's the how too, which is you don't just complain. Like men don't vent. At least they shouldn't, I don't think, entirely just vent on their spouses. I think we can do that with other men a little bit more than we can with our spouses, which is why it's important you build up a male relationship, relationships with males. But I think when you're talking with your wife about the issues, it would be more something like this. Hey, hon, I know I've been off for the last couple of weeks. And the reason is because work has been very stressful. We're about to hit this deadline. Our boss is not very happy with things right now and how it's going. And to be honest, I'm a little scared and worried that we're going to make the deadline, or that even if we do, this is going to be an effective project. So I just want to let you know that's where I'm at. But let me tell you, I'm going to put in 2 nights a week, a little bit of extra work just so we make sure we hit the deadline. I've communicated with my boss about my expectations as this project has developed, and we've brought in a couple of other advisors or other team members to shore this up. So we're working on it, but I just want to let you know where I'm coming from. Like, how much more powerful is that for a woman to hear than I'm scared and I don't know what's going to happen and the world's going to be over, as opposed to I'm scared, I'm a little nervous, and here's what we're doing to resolve it. Right.
Yeah.
So I would say be more inclined to do that than just dump it all over her.
Yeah. I like it. Rick Donovan, describe the difference between today's Ryan versus 6 months ago, Ryan. So your personal growth in the last 6 months. Yeah.
I'm leaner. I'm sober. Focus is there. Clarity is there. I've been doing a lot of work about, where do my stories and the narrative of my life and the way that I think about life and the way that I show up for people, like, where does that stem from? Those have been powerful exercises because they happen whether you're aware of it or not. The way that I respond to you is happening. I just may or may not be aware of why it's happening the way that it is. So these types of exercises have been very powerful. I'm trying to get more in line with how I feel about things. And again, where does that stem from? Because my feelings these are things that I have not really explored all that much in my life. And I've been thinking, sadness or sorrow or anger or frustration, are these things okay to feel and experience? Yeah, they are. But we should know why we're experiencing that and where they're coming from, so that we have some feedback on the way that we can improve ourselves and our lives moving forward. That's been helpful. A little bit more clear on my priorities, and making sure that my schedule aligns with my priorities, and also a lot more forward thinking about what kind of person I need to be when I'm presented with an option of how I behave or how I show up or what I do, which is literally hundreds of times a day. I try to ask myself, what would the man that I want to be do in this situation? So a lot more conscious and aware of that. And yeah, all of those things have given me a level of clarity and focus. And in the midst of really challenging times in my life over the past several months, I just can't help but think, where would I be if I didn't do this? Where would I be if I didn't have these tools? It would be a really dire situation. And fortunately, I'm not there because I have the tools and because I'm exercising the tools that I've failed to exercise in the past.
Yeah. You know, one thing I've noticed that I think is a byproduct of you kind of doing that more deeper work in regards to understanding, you know, your stories is, and maybe I'm just picking this up, I don't know, but your level of empathy and understanding has changed as well. And I think it's because the more we understand ourselves, the more we're capable of understanding others and
Yeah.
their actions. And I think that is, I don't know, for whatever, I don't have evidence of why I feel that way, but I see that in your language or in our conversations more as well.
Well, I know I'm not as angry. I was very angry and it was slipping out. Like it was slipping out in weird ways, even on social media and the way that I would respond to people on social media and just how I felt. There's like frustration and contention and anger. And a lot of that might have been the alcoholism or the results of the alcohol. Like it's just
Yeah.
angry. And I'm not angry. But I also see, over these past 6 months or so with what I've experienced, sometimes I don't want to talk about it. Like I just want to deal with it on my own, which I think we should be capable of dealing with
Yeah.
things to some degree on our own. But then I got thinking, man, this is of course how everybody else feels. And there are so many men out there who are struggling with substance abuse, pornography, drug addiction, guilt ridden past that they can't get over, fidelity issues, medical challenges, financial struggles, being cut off spiritually from having that spiritual component of their life, and all of us are doing it alone. And so
Yeah.
when I look at you or somebody else who maybe says something to me that I don't like or does something that rubs me the wrong way, I really am trying to say, you know what? I don't know what's going on in that guy's life. Like I don't know what he's dealing with right now. And maybe the way that he's communicating with me is a byproduct of what he might be suffering from. And there are a lot of guys suffering. So I don't know. I feel like giving guys the benefit of the doubt, at least trying to do that. It's twofold. Number one, I think it's better for them that we're not so harsh and critical and judgmental. And number two, it's just made me a more pleasant person. Like, so here's an example. I took my boys to South Carolina for Sorinex Outdoors Winter Strong this last weekend. And we got on the plane yesterday, and the ticketing agent, as I was getting on board, she says, "Here's your ticket. We moved it around so you can have an aisle seat. You can sit next to your boys, but nobody's going to be sitting next to you. They're going to be sitting across the aisle, and you'll be sitting on the other side of the aisle." I said, "Oh, great. Thanks for doing that." And she said, "Nobody's going to be sitting next to you." And I'm sitting there, and they were getting close to finishing boarding the plane. And this woman comes in, and she's heavy, she's obese, and she comes in. She's like, "Hey, I'm sitting in that seat," which was the window seat. I'm like, and she was significantly obese, so much so that the aisle, the armrest thing, couldn't lower all the way because it was like resting on the fat
Or
on her
hip or
hips.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, so it wouldn't even lower all the way. So it was snug. And 6 months ago, I would have been put out. I would have been so judgmental about it. I would have been, mocking her, not to her face, of course, but,
In your mind. Yeah.
in my mind or even in my boys, and then I would just be kind of miserable on the plane. And you know what? It's like, now, do I think that's a healthy lifestyle? No, but I don't know what she's dealing with. I don't know. Maybe her mom just died. And so she's letting herself go. Or maybe she just lost her husband. I have no idea. And it's not really my place to judge that. I have to say that I personally don't want to live my life like that. And I don't think other people should live their life like that. I think we should be healthy. I don't know what's going on with her. And she's a
Yeah.
human being. And you know what? She was sitting there and she was crocheting. And I talked to her for a little bit. The blanket she was making was beautiful. She was a really pleasant lady. And like, that's it. And so I had to suffer a little bit because the armrest wasn't all the way down between us. Like, what a silly thing that we would get worked up about in the past. So I appreciate you saying that. And I certainly feel more patient, more empathetic. And I'm just not miserable. I don't want to be miserable. And I'm not. So I feel good about that.
Cool. I like it, man. Good job. Good work. All right, Joe Mercado. I've been working for a replacement window company for 5 years. I put in long hours and dedicated myself to learning to be better leader and manager for myself, employees, in the company. What do you do when your two managers don't communicate with you unless there is a problem, and that every idea that you pitch to them is always answered with a no? Our company culture is built by growing others and take your place someday, but these two managers aren't helping me grow. I'm starting to see that no matter how great my side of the operation is, the only feedback I'm getting is when I didn't do as well as I did on the previous month. I love the company and the people I lead, and I want to stay, but this relationship with my managers isn't motivating. And if it wasn't doing well, I would already be replaced, but I continue to do my best so they know, have no reason to. Note, last year I won the leadership award, which was voted by the people of the operations. Thanks.
Yeah. So I'll go back to the empathy thing. And I'll just speak from personal experience as a leader. It's easy not to focus on the people who are doing really good.
Totally.
Super easy. Like, Kip, you're doing a great
It's
job.
default behavior.
Joe, you're doing a great job. Like, I don't need to worry about this. Like, everything's fine. And then as a leader, we focus our energy and attention on the people who are struggling, or the areas or departments in your case that might be struggling. And that's unfortunate. And that's the fallout of being good at things. You're not going to get praise. You're not going to get accolades. You're not going to get attention and energy. You're not going to get people's time and resources. You're just not, because you're good at your job. And you have to come to that realization and then ask yourself, am I doing this because I want the praise and the accolades and the admiration and the attention and the rewards and the whatever? Or am I doing this because it's who I am? It's intrinsically, internally, the way that I work, and you can do it regardless of if you're getting attention or not. And I don't know what that is for you. I'm just telling you that maybe you're running up against that. Now, how can we assert ourselves in this situation a little bit more? Try to see it from your boss's perspective. What other departments are they struggling with? And is that getting a lot of their time and attention and energy? If it is, then maybe you have a reason as to why that's the case. I'm not saying it makes it okay. I'm just saying now you know at least what's going on, and you have some context around why you're not getting the attention you'd like to have. Also, it might create some opportunities for you to see things that will actually help them. So instead of saying, oh man, like I just want them to acknowledge and see what I'm doing, maybe in their briefings or their discussions or their communications with you, you can actually see problems and challenges that you can begin to shore up, that they're not even really communicating with you, that now is an opportunity for you to serve and help in a way that would actually be beneficial for them. That might be something you can do. And the third thing I'll say on this is doing the right thing, just like we were saying earlier, being excellent is always the right thing to do. And you know what's going to happen by you being excellent? Either you're going to continue to advance and get promoted, or you're going to find other work. Like, it's inevitable. But if you start slacking and you start speaking ill of your managers and you start not taking your job seriously because maybe they don't, then you will not get the same level of opportunity and growth that you would if you did it with excellence. So keep doing it with excellence. Keep networking. That's huge. Too many men under network. It's just an underutilized skill that we could develop all a little bit more. Keep networking, build your connection, work with your clients, get introductions, make introductions. And that's actually what's going to create opportunities for you inside and outside of the business.
Yeah. The only thought I had is we try to promote a culture where people are self-directed,
Mm.
not motivated, self-directed. They know what winning looks like, and they execute and they win. If I'm a manager and I have an employee, it's like, oh man, I'm not motivated. I need more motivation from you. Mm, that's a problem. So be careful that, because that was in your language. I think you said something like, I'm not motivated by them or whatever. Did you, back to kind of what Ryan said earlier, you got to be self-directed. Why are you doing this? Because you care about the quality of work, because it's an outward representation of who you are as a man. That's why you care. Right. And you're
Right.
going to get after it and you're going to do amazing work because that's how you show up in the world, not because you're motivated to do so. And that's less stress, right? Let's be frank. And I agree. I don't do this very well either. I'm really bad at telling my employees that they're doing good, right? Like it's only usually when there's a problem that I'll give feedback, and I need to work on that. And that's not an excuse. But most managers and leaders, there's time issues, right? There's time management problems, and they don't have a lot of time.
Right.
And so the more time you require to be a good employee from me, the less effective employee you are in my mind. Because now I got to constantly motivate you. I got to baby you. I got to, man, you got to jump in like you're the owner of the company, be self-directed and execute, keep them informed. And then there's some opportunity here to maybe have some open communication and have some asks. You know, can I get a follow-up with you once a month or in our one-on-ones? You know, I'd like to understand, what am I doing well? What areas am I doing good at, so I can make sure I continue to do those things? Like, ask, you know, and have that conversation with them. If you're not getting the proper feedback, ask for the proper feedback and make that part of the process, but make it clear, hey, by getting the proper feedback from you, Ryan, if you let me know where I'm killing it and what I'm doing well, I need to know that personally, so I can keep doing those things, because sometimes I'll question like, oh, was that a good approach or was that not good? Most people will be like, oh yeah, definitely. I'll do that. That's fair. Right. And it
Yeah.
makes sense to them. So, you know, bring that to the table as well.
100%.
Good.
I wrote down something here that I think is really important, is that all of us, I think, as men can do better on, and that's validating ourselves. You know, if you can validate yourself, that's significantly more potent than needing validation from somebody else. So, for example, if you're trying to get into shape, and you notice you've lost 5, 10, 20 pounds, the muscles are getting bigger, the abs are starting to show, you've got more energy, you really shouldn't have to go to somebody else and say, hey, how do I look? Like that. I mean, it's nice. It's nice if somebody notices, or your wife says, hey, you feel good. Like, those are nice things, but you shouldn't have to go out and seek that from other people. You should look in the mirror and say, you know what? I look good. I feel good. If we're striving for this validation from other people, then I think that's a deficiency
It's
in our
fleeting.
confidence and our own ability to validate ourselves. And you should be able to do that. You should be able to look at the guy in the mirror and say, I'm proud of myself today. Like, I accomplished everything on my to-do list, and that's enough. That's all that I need to feel good about myself. Or, I went to the gym and I didn't want to, and I worked out and I trained, and it was hard, but I did every rep. I didn't even slack on a rep. Nobody was there and I could have, but I didn't. You should feel proud about that. And you should feel accomplished. And then you should look the guy in the mirror, or in journaling or whatever, and say, I'm proud because I did this thing. And that should be enough, because you will always have yourself, but you won't always have other people.
Yeah, I like it. Let's do a couple rapid fire ones. I think we
Cool.
can get these good answers in here. So Dex Reese, how to brainstorm and come up with a business name, and should one name it before trademarking it?
Well, you have
That
to have a
last question
name
I
in order to
completely
trademark
understand.
something. Yeah.
Do a trademark. Yeah. So okay,
You have to have
how
something
brainstorming coming
trademark.
up with a company name?
So number one is make the thesaurus your best friend and just
Mm-hmm.
start writing down words. So when it was order of man, for me, I think I looked at things like group, which turned into brotherhood, which turned into fraternity, And eventually I came across order. I'm like, order. Okay. Well, there's a double meaning of that, right? Order as in a collection of us, a group of us, but order as in setting things straight. It's a double meaning. It sounds really cool. And it has that meaning and purpose behind it. So make the thesaurus your best friend. Write down the values, right? Just write down a bunch of words that explain what you're doing and why you're doing it and how it will serve other people. I like names that I don't like being so cryptic in names that people don't know what in the world it is.
What the
People say, well,
company does.
yeah, people say, well, what about Google? Well, you're not Google. All right. Like you don't have billions of
And it took a
dollars
lot of
behind
marketing
you.
to make that work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So let's not do that. A better thing would be thebestsearchengine.com. I mean, right? Like,
Totally.
so
Yeah.
but you also don't need to be so blatantly obvious, too on the nose that it's not even interesting. So there's some of that you need to take into consideration. I think another important consideration is that if you do come up with some names, that you start looking at the social media handles if they're available, because and website, because
And
if
the
none of it is
websites.
available,
Yeah. The domains.
I would probably pick a different name. But yeah, make the thesaurus your best friend. Know it's going to take time, and just jot down words. When you think of words, just write them down and then go through this thesaurus, and you'll come up with some stuff pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah. And you might want to test it out a little bit. Super funny story. I'll share it super fast. So I was doing some military work. I started my company after Asia and I got married, and Kiave's middle name, he's Hawaii, obviously Asia's Hawaiian and Kiave's a Hawaiian name. And his full name is Kiave Okipono. And Pono means great in Hawaiian. And I really like that. Like, I was just like, Pono. I don't know. I latched onto it. And so I used that company name, right? And it was like Pono Innovations or something like that, if I remember correctly. And I was in the office with a bunch of military guys. We're working, and guys like, hey, what's your email? I'll shoot you over that email or whatever. And I'm like, kip@ponoinnovations.com. And he goes, what did you just say? And I'm like, Pono. And he's like, oh shit, I thought you said porno. And I was like,
oh yeah,
okay,
yep,
changing the company name, right?
Yep.
Like, it wasn't going to work, right? And to your point, no one knows what that is. It doesn't mean anything unless my primary audience is Hawaiians,
right?
It's going to get lost on everybody, right? So, but it was really funny because I was like, didn't even consider
Didn't
that,
even
right?
think about that.
And these guys, and then there's guys like, man, I heard you say that a couple times. I thought, what a horrible company name. I was like, oh man,
that's funny. I even get it with Order of Man at times, because people, one of the first people I introduced it to said, what? Order of Man? I'm like, no, not order a man, order of man. So yeah, you have to take that into consideration for sure.
Future business venture, by the way. I've had so many women, like, I'm not joking, by the way. I've had single women talk to me about, hey, how do I get introductions to the guys inside of the Order of Man?
That's funny.
Because they have this idea, right? Like, hey, these are stellar guys. Do you guys have a bunch of single guys? And I was like,
I actually have some ideas for that.
Yeah,
and I'm not joking. I actually have some ideas for that, because if we can connect single people who are motivated, then that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, Ryan's thinking of a business idea of borderline being a pimp and pimping out the members of the Iron Council, but
totally.
Hey,
totally. Not even borderline, just blatantly, obviously, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing.
Ryan the Pimp Mickler.
That's right. That's right.
I like it. All right, Stacy Bauer. I've had 2 employees leave the company in the last week. One, I just read the email tonight. How do you not take things personal? And how do you make sure more don't follow, mainly as you're trying to grow your business every day and every year?
So the way that here's a little exercise that I do not to take things personally is I imagine that it happened to something or somebody else. So for example, if somebody leaves the Iron Council, which I usually
I told you that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, what I'm saying is I just try to take myself out of the equation and objectify the situation. So if somebody leaves the Iron Council, it's like, did they leave me? No, they left the Iron Council. Why? I don't know. If I was giving advice to somebody else, maybe it's because they had their own issues. maybe they didn't like the organization. Is that a reflection on me? I mean, kind of, but also if it's this separate entity, not really. And then you just look for feedback. Okay, well, why did they leave? And you just decide not to take it personal. You have no idea what we talked about this a minute ago. You have no idea what's going on in that person's life. You have what they've told you, which very rarely is 100% accurate. So you are filling in the blanks with all sorts of stuff that may or may not be relevant or may not be true. And it's just best not to try to go down that rabbit hole. And how do you do it? You just decide not to do it. And you tell yourself, hey, you know what? That person left. Frustrating, but I'm going to do better. I had one guy in the Iron Council, this was years ago, it was almost like a mutiny. He was one of our team leaders and got very toxic towards me and what we were doing in the Iron Council. Started calling me a Nazi.
Even after he left, I think.
Yeah. And he ended up taking his entire team down with him. And I took that one very personally. And it was personal. It absolutely was personal because he was making personal claims about me. And then I just made a decision that, you know what? Like, I don't know what's going on with him. I don't know what he's dealing with. I don't know. Not only do I not know what entirely what's going on in his life, I don't know what lens he's viewing life through. I know none of that. So instead of worrying about it being so personal, I need to ensure it doesn't happen again. So I asked myself, what can be learned from this? What can be learned from this little mutiny that happened? And how can I avoid this happening again? And so it was a matter of better communication, staying in touch with our team leaders and our team members, looking for standards so we're all operating very similarly on teams. And I learned a lot, and it actually served me really well over time. It's very hard not to take things like that personal.
Yeah. So his second question, making sure that more employees don't leave. Thoughts there?
Well, I think one thing,
just learning.
Well, learning, yeah, but also communication, because again, we're talking about a lot of assumptions here. So what ends up happening is people will leave, and then everybody's going to know Bob's not there anymore. And if you don't address it, people are going to start jumping to conclusions. Oh, you know what? Yeah. I heard
you want to communicate
it. And Bob were having a bad time, and there was some animosity, and that's all this rumors and hearsay. And then, oh, this is a toxic environment. Now all of a sudden another person leaves. So I think the best thing you could do is bring it up. Now, I'm not suggesting that you make it a bigger deal than it is. You don't want to do that because there might be things that just aren't a big deal, but it might just be simply, maybe it's in one of your morning briefings, or maybe it's an email, and you're going to speak kindly about Bob, regardless of the way that it went down.
Yeah. And just from an HR perspective, don't go down that path, right? That's going to set you up for trouble.
Yeah, good point. But it might be a company-wide email, and it says, hey guys, just want to give you the heads up. Unfortunately, Bob's decided to move on. We really wish him the best. We had some good times here, and I just wanted to let you know that Bob's presence will be noted, or absence will be noted. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. But in the meantime, again, this goes back to how to talk with women. That was the problem. Now the solution. In the meantime, we're interviewing for a brand new CEO. If you're interested in the position and you're qualified, please let us know through the appropriate channels. Or if you know of anybody who might be interested, then please let us know and we can talk about that. Man, you get out ahead of it. You let people know what's going on. You don't make a big deal out of it. And then you talk about how you're moving forward. You're fine.
Yeah, I like it. One thing that part of my one-on-ones and quarterly plans is a conversation around commitment level. And this is something that we bring up to every employee all the time. Are you all in? And maybe another way of saying it, where's your job love? Are you loving it? Are you still excited? Are you loving what you're doing? Like, how you feeling? Or do you have any barriers? And you want to have the dialogue where the employee is willing to go and tell you, like, hey, you know what? I feel undervalued. Why? Oh man, I'm not getting enough feedback from my boss that I'm actually succeeding. Or, you know what, I think I'm underpaid or whatever. Like for us to have fully committed and bought in employees, you need to be having the conversation of like, where are they? And then your job is to eliminate barriers and help them get back on the path of being excited about where they're working at. And when they show up in that kind of way, employees are they're bringing their best foot to the table. They're excited. They bring some passion to the work. You don't want an employee that's checked out. They're there 9 to 5, bare minimum, doing just enough not to get fired. No, no, no. We're going for like, you love your job, right? No, there's some things I don't. Okay, let's address those and let's talk about it. And how do we pivot? Oh, I don't know what the future looks like here. Awesome. Let's talk about it. What do you think the future could be? And address those things, because eventually an employee will leave due to a lack of commitment and buy-in to what you're doing as an organization. And those intrinsic motivators that keep them around are everything from sense of team belonging and future with the company, not feeling appreciated, not being heard. Like, and guess what? Those are different for Ryan, and they're different for me, and they're different for the guy across the hall. So you got to know your people to understand what makes them tick and what gives them high level of job love, if you want to use that term. Otherwise, you're going to lose them. So address that.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. Should we take one
Okay.
more?
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Scott, Jarday. Sorry, Scott. I've noticed that often guys are looking for a girlfriend that's like a bro. Is this a sign of immaturity? And are these guys missing out on what a woman really is by looking for another bro in her?
I don't know what you mean by like guys are looking for a girl like a bro.
Yeah. Is it just like a
Somebody,
buddy? Like I don't know.
yeah, and that's not what I guess that's I don't feel that way, so it's hard for me to fathom why you'd want a bro as a partner. But I think what you should be looking for in a woman is somebody who challenges you, who in the right ways, not just to be confrontational, but challenges you to
Yeah.
improve and to get better and to be excellent. Somebody who could be the mother of your children, who is empathetic and kind and nurturing and caring. Somebody whose vision is aligned with yours, from their spiritual path and journey to the way they feel about money and politics. I think these are all little things that could splinter a relationship very, very easily. So you should be aligned in some of those key fundamental issues. And then ultimately somebody that you can serve, really, that you are there to challenge them in the right ways and then to support and guide and edify and uplift. And that doesn't sound like a bro necessarily. So what's the what was the question about why do you guys do this?
Yeah. Is it a sign of immaturity and
Well, I think it's a sign of, yeah, I think immaturity is probably a
yeah,
good
what are
word
they
for it.
yeah, and what are they missing out? I guess. What are they missing out when they approach a relationship with a woman that way?
I just think the people that I'm around don't think that. That's why I'm struggling with this
Yeah.
question. And so maybe you ought to
Yeah.
change the people that you're around. Like the guys that I'm around, they don't think that way of their wives. They think so highly of their wives. They honor them. They cherish them. They support them. Like I said earlier, they edify and uplift those individuals. Yeah, and what you're missing out on is a life of fulfillment. Truly, I mean, that's what it is. When you're that to a woman and she is that to you, you're both fulfilled and there's joy in your life. And there's still challenges and struggles, but you're able to get through it together. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I mean, look, if guys are looking for a buddy or they just think the sex is good, that's going to be fleeting. And in many ways, I think that's probably going to diminish the way that you feel about the opposite sex. If women are just looking for a sex partner or a man's just looking for somebody to get laid with, I think that's going to diminish and undermine the way you look at women or the way that women look at men, and ultimately do yourself some damage. So it's unfortunate. I guess some people do, but that's an inferior way of looking at the opposite sex.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So a couple call to actions here, guys. If you haven't connected with us, please do so via social media. You can connect with Mr. Mickler on Instagram and Twitter at Ryan Mickler. And if you haven't joined us on our Facebook group, you can join us there by going to facebook.com/group/order of man. And of course, we're going to be opening up the Iron Council pretty soon. So be prepared for that. And to learn more about the Iron Council, you can go to orderofman.com/Iron Council. Are you still doing the discount on
Yeah.
on the
50%
store?
off
Okay.
in the store right now. Just trying to clear out some inventory. So if you use the code 50 at checkout, you'll get 50% off. Hey, I got to say one more thing about this. I was just thinking about as you were saying that with this relationship with women. Um, and I started to think about why a man would not commit to a woman fully or talk about it in the way that we just did. And I think there's two primary reasons for that. Number one, it's hard. It's really difficult to do that. It takes time and attention and energy and focus and stamina and care and kindness. It's really hard. Like the other thing is that there is a really dangerous precedent in society being set that, and I think it started with feminism, especially as we moved into this third wave of feminism, where they began to look at men uh, as this tyrannical patriarchy, if you will, and they were the victims of manliness and masculinity when clearly that's not the case. But then in the aftermath of that, you have this overreaction from these feminists to men and the way that they show up and the way they serve, and these women have felt like they've been at the mercy of these dominant, controlling, power hungry men. And the response was bitterness and hostility and anger towards men. And now we're seeing a pendulum shift. And now we're seeing little factions of men who are now doing the same thing, but to women. Well, women are victimizing us. Women are evil. Women are bitches. They're out to get our money. They're out. And there's some things that, you should be aware of for sure. The family court system, for example, is one that's a dangerous, dangerous thing. But both of those things, the fact that it's hard and the fact that there's a growing group of men who believe themselves to be victims to women, or incels, if you will, it's laziness. It's just laziness. It's lazy to say, well, I'm not going to do that because that takes so much work. That's lazy. It's lazy to say, well, all women are bitches and they're just out to get us and they're going to screw us over. That's not generally true. And it's a lazy argument. And that's what I think anyways. That's why it's easier to be lazy for sure than it is to work hard and be diligent and put your head down towards something meaningful.
I like it.
All right, guys. Well, cool. Well, Kip, appreciate you guys. Thanks for the great questions today. We'll keep recording as long as you keep having questions, and we'll try to give you the best answers we can. But until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.